that if things have worked without a hitch before and you changed nothing, then nothing would change. So if you're watching on Twitch, it says that I'm talking about the Tao Te Ching. I am not talking about the Tao Te Ching today, and there is no Zen Buro. It's just me. For whatever reason, the Twitch API is not connecting with Restream, so I couldn't update the title. If you guys use Restream and you have an idea of how I might fix that, I've tried reauthorizing my Twitch account, and it doesn't work. So, it says I'm talking about the Tao Te Ching. I'm not talking about the Tao Te Ching. I am the philosophical vagabond and the Lord of Gimpy, but I'm not talking about Eastern philosophy today. Today, I don't really have much of a plan except to answer a couple of questions, and I would like to talk about the Netflix original documentary called Crip Camp. Crip Camp is really freaking interesting, right? Like, I didn't know how I was going to feel about it. I'm still not entirely sure how to feel. Like, I know, like, man, it's just because there's so much nuance present in a documentary like that that I wasn't. I'm used to documentaries having a very specific agenda and never really deviating from that agenda, like trying to use rhetoric plus like pseudo deductive reasoning to like be convincing. But um, this I felt painted a very nuanced portrait of disability and people with disabilities and the kinds of things that we think about. What's up, my brother Blacktastic? You are just in time to hear me talk about motherfucking Crip Camp. uh, that documentary was something else, man. Let me tell you. Um, it's crazy, dude. Like, so here's some things that I didn't know. Crip Camp was what people called Camp Jened who went to it because it started in the 1950s as a camp. I think they said it was in the Catskill Mountains for people with disabilities to kind of like sort of congregate and be together and that sort of thing, right? And so that's really cool. And they interviewed a bunch of people who used to be camp counselors over there. And they talked about how, like, in the 50s, it was pretty much your standard, like, summer camp. And the only difference being is that you had people that look kind of like me, right? If you're thinking brown, yeah, I'm sure they had brown people there too. But, like, there were also people in, like, wheelchairs and, you know, that use, like, walkers and, like, arm braces and crutches and canes and various stuff. And like as the counterculture movement got started in the 60s and in the 70s, the people who worked the camp decided that they wanted to experiment and just sort of turn it into a place where teenagers could just be teenagers. So if you like whatever you wanted to do, they found a way to make it happen. Like one dude was saying, like, yeah, if you wanted to try to play baseball, you're not going to be the last person to be picked for a team. But if you swing and you miss, like nobody's going to give you a second chance. You're out, right? And I thought that was pretty cool. And they had like imagery of like people crawling around playing soccer with their hands and it was super funny because man, the camp itself was really interesting to me because it seems like it turned out being a place where people could just get into stuff. You know what I mean? Like teenagers were experimenting with like physical affection and sex for the first time because like yeah, and stuff like that. I mean, it was funny because in somewhere in the middle of the beginning of the documentary, they had they had a crabs outbreak at the camp. And so they had to quarantine the boys from the girls so they could like clean the situation up. I thought That was hilarious, man. Like things that youth get into, you feel me? Especially during that period where it was like all free love and stuff. Uh, and like, man, it's hard for me to talk about a documentary like that without talking about social issues that are still going on, right? Because there were some things that I learned that I didn't know, and there are some things that I grew up with an implicit understanding of. And to some extent, some of these things aren't so bad. Hey, geekettes, I love you guys. Thank you for showing up to listen to me ramble about Crip Camp. I don't know how long this stream is going to be, so if y'all need to dip out, or if you have any questions, ask me questions. Yeah, it's just good to have you guys here. So some things that I forgot, yeah, I'm going to say I forgot because I probably knew at one point. So the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 was initially the Rehabilitation Act of 1972. The reason it got renamed with a different year is simply because Nixon vetoed the bill. And why did President Nixon veto the bill? Because he thought that it would cost too much money to make places accessible to people like me. And if you guys, movie recommendation. Watch a movie called Music Within. I think it stars a guy by the name of Ron Livingston. It's sort of made for TV-ish. I don't know that it had a theatrical release, but it's really good, and it's about the relationship between Dr. Richard Pimentel, I'll tell you who he is in a second, and a guy by the name of Art Honeyman. Richard Pimentel is still with us. Art Honeyman passed some time ago. Art Honeyman was a dude with a literal genius IQ, but he was locked up in a quad CP body. And a little bit about that movie real quick. Ron Livingston, if I remember right, plays Richard Pimentel. He's a dude that serves in Vietnam after living an extraordinarily difficult life. I have the utmost respect for the dude, even when I don't agree with his political views on certain things, and it's because I freaking understand where he's coming from, right? So he serves in Vietnam. He gets tinnitus because of an explosion from a grenade going off in their camp tent, and he's deaf. And so he gets back from Vietnam, and freaking like he tries to go to the VA, being like, "Yo, dudes, I want to go back to school, and I want to have a job, and I want to do things because GI Bill, right?" And you guys got to remember, this was the guarantee of the U.S. government that all servicemen and women would have the right to an education and job training when they got out of the military for serving their country, especially in Vietnam, right? The GI Bill was pretty much hammered out in the years following World War II. Oh, dope. Thank you. Yeah, definitely do that. It's super entertaining and ridiculously educational all at the same time. And so Richard Pimentel basically gets told, "What the hell are you going to do? You're deaf. You can't even understand what people are saying to you." And he was like, "Bro, just because I lost my hearing doesn't mean I can't do anything, right?" So he basically makes a big stink, and they give him the money to go to school. He does a bunch of like training in terms of like lip reading, but he finds that he has an insanely hard time understanding people because he has a persistent ringing in his ear. And then he meets this dude by the name of Art Honeyman, who, like I said before, was a literal genius. And according to interviews I've seen of both of them, how they became friends was basically Art Honeyman called him an asshole, and then he was like, "Holy shit, I can hear you." Like, Art's voice was such that because of the CP, he spoke at the perfect register to cut through Pimentel's tinnitus, because most people either spoke too low or too high, right? And he could hear Art perfectly, and they like bonded because they didn't fit in anywhere. So they just got into some shenanigans, and uh, Dr. Pimentel eventually became the person who passed, or not passed, but he was instrumental in passing the Americans with Disabilities Act, and he was responsible for creating the Windmills program, which is still responsible for this day in terms of providing guidelines for uh, federal employment of people with disabilities. So back to the documentary. The first segment of the documentary for me, like, highlighted perfectly the fact that um, people with disabilities, right, just want to have really normal experiences. Like, they want to be appreciated as people. They want their voices to be heard. They want to feel like everyone else in terms of the fact that they provide value in a society that devalues them. They want to fall in love. They want to have sex. Some of them want to have families. Some of them don't. Some of them want jobs. I mean, some can't work because of physical limitations. Um, like, I know some people who can't speak and move on their own. Which part, Geekettes? Which part? Um, I'm watching chat, so I got you. Which part? Um, let's see. Where was I? So, I mean, that was highlighted to me in the first part of the documentary in a huge freaking way, right? And it's still true to this day. Like, that's all anybody wants, and I don't think that the way you look, or the way that you move, or the way that you interact with objects in the world should preclude someone from having access to very basic experiences, like, like having a job, like engaging in physical affection with another person. These are very, very basic human experiences, dudes. Like, they're not they're not mind-blowing experiences in and of themselves, but for people who don't routinely get them and who don't feel a sense of being valued, right? They are life-changing, even if they're not mind-blowing. And they can completely change the way you look at the world. There's a couple parts of the documentary that I wanted to highlight other than that. Judy Heumann is... Oh, I forget there's a 10-second delay. My bad. My bad. So yeah, from my point of view, first of all, I want to say, like, I'm extremely thankful for especially those who served in Vietnam, who were instrumental in getting the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 passed, with Section 504 kept completely intact. Without you guys, without the deaf community, like, I don't feel like people of my generation would have had a voice. And learning about all of the sacrifices that all of these people went through to fight for what I came to know as, like, very basic rights, it's very humbling. But it's also very weird for me because I was born in 1983. I was born before the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed. Section 504 only applied to public institutions and public buildings. And it still didn't guarantee... Oh, that was the other thing. And so, like, one of the proposed adaptations, this is what I didn't know, right? One of the proposed adaptations of Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 wanted to invoke the doctrine of separate but equal, right? So separate schools for, like, kids with disabilities, separate everything, and that was, hopefully going to be okay, or so that person, or so those people thought. And I'm still kind of a product of the tail end of that, right? Because I went to the school I did because it was the only school in my school district um, that had um, accommodations for people that used wheelchairs. And like, to give you a notion about how deep the idea of separation for the sake of safety was when I was growing up. Story time, y'all. If you haven't read my book, get in the know. It's available at Amazon.com. Anyway, so when I was growing up, because this relates entirely to the documentary, in my opinion, um, I went to a school that isn't the same school anymore. It's been renamed a couple times. But when I was at it, um, like I said, it was the only school in the district. They had an OH special ed unit. OH stood for orthopedically handicapped. So anyone with a physical disability was over there. And if you had any intellectual disability or whatever, like, you were put there too. And so we had this ridiculous rule, right? The playground was basically divided in half, and we were only allowed on one side of it, and the regular kids, and that's how we referred to like the kids that didn't have disabilities, like the regular kids, we weren't allowed to go play with them because people were afraid we would get hurt. So my dumbass was like, these mofos are having way more fun than I am, so I'm gonna go over there. So I crossed the red line that divided the playground. And then I got in trouble for crossing the red line. And then, like, I would get, like, recess detentions. They used to call it putting you on the wall, right? So you literally have to, like, sit there, turn around, and stare at the wall for the entire time you're on recess. Uh, so, like, I would stay to my half of the playground for, like, a day or two, and then, like, I'd try to go over there again. And then I got in trouble again, and I'm like, well, if I technically don't cross the line, I wonder what they would say. So I figured out a way around the school that would put me on the other side of the line without me technically crossing the line, because the line doesn't cut across the whole school, only the playground, right? So technically, I didn't cross the line to get where I was. So that's what I did. And I started learning to play tetherball, soccer, basketball, and all this other fun stuff. And then, like, we had this VP named Mr. Price, and he was like, Mr. Brady, why are you doing this? Don't you know we're doing it for your own good? You guys could get hurt. The school could get sued. And I'm like, and this is me at 6 years old. I'm like, so that's what you're really worried about. You're not really worried about my well-being. You're worried about whether or not the school's going to get sued and you're going to lose your job, right? And he just kind of looked at me like I was dumb. And I'm like, am I wrong or am I not wrong? He's like, well, it's not wrong, but like, there's more to it. And I'm like, tell me, what else is there to it? I'm kind of smart, like, I understand what you're saying to me, obviously. And then he just kind of looked at me and he was like, go back to class. Like, you're not on detention anymore. And I went around the line again. Played soccer, volleyball, tetherball, all that stuff that I learned to like doing. And the principal, his name was Dr. Ma, rest in peace, was a good dude. He came and he was like, oh, dude, hell yeah, throw that link in the chat. Throw that link in the chat for me. Buy that book. If you want a signed copy, I have a box with a few books left. I can sign one. All you got to do is give me a place to send it in the private messages. But so Dr. Ma was like, because everybody called me Abel. People still call me Abel, right? Because baptism and my grandpa and a whole fight between my dad and my grandpa about my name. But so he was like, Abel, what are you doing? And I was like, what are you talking about? And he was like, everybody's been telling me you've been crossing that line on the playground. Like, how are we supposed to keep you safe if you disobey the rules? And I was like, well, Dr. Ma, with all due respect, I think the rule shouldn't be a rule. And you could see him getting visibly frustrated. Like, I'm a stubborn person, right? But he was like, okay, well, do you have a case for that? And it just so happened that it was Black History Month, and like we were in elementary school, so we were making little construction paper silhouettes of civil rights figures from the Black Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s and before. My favorite dude, the way they taught him, was Dr. Martin Luther King. So I was reading about Dr. Martin Luther King, and like what I saw to me looked like segregation. So what I told Dr. Ma was, isn't this the same as when white people told black people to use different restrooms, to go to different restaurants, to use different water fountains? And he just kind of looked at me like, damn, I don't know what to say, because like he's kind of right. And I told him, like, shouldn't we be trying to like teach these kids how to play with people in this place without hurting us, instead of just making it separate? And so like some time went by, and we had one of these boards with lined construction paper, almost cardboard, where all the rules of the school were in them. And he came in one day and he took out that rule. And I was like, what happened? And he's like, we're going to do assemblies and try to figure this out, because, like, you're right. We shouldn't be doing that. After that, our school started mainstreaming kids, which is another topic, so I'll get back to the documentary. Like, a couple of stories really stood out to me. There was a couple that was elderly in the documentary that had CP, and I thought their story was ridiculously sweet. Because they met at Camp Jened, right? And like they did their own thing for a while, but they ended up together, and I'm like, see, this is the kind of shit I need to see. Because, man, I can't express enough how different I would have looked at myself had I known something like this was happening before I was born, and that people actually learned at places like this to be okay with who they were. I was also very humbled by the thread of the story of Judy Heumann throughout the documentary, right? Like, she took like boots to the pavement, and she really, really fought and tried to convince people that this was a worthwhile thing to do. And like, there were people climbing up steps to make it to protest because there were no elevators. And thinking about the way that people thought of us then, and I want to make it very clear, people still think that way about people like me. Like, right, it was so beautiful, man. But it also made me laugh that dude's wife, before they got married, like, had an affair with the bus driver that worked at UCP. And then she got gonorrheas. And she was like, I was proud of myself because, like, I did it. Like, I wasn't going to die a virgin. And that's a thing too, man. Like, I know friends personally who've turned to a consecrated religious life because they think that another person loving them in the relationship and marital sense, right, is not possible for them. And to be honest, when I sit and I think about like all the time somebody told me, ew, I would never date you, you're in a wheelchair, like ew, you're a retard. Or like they break up with me and they're like, please don't think it's because of your legs or some shit like that, right? When I think of those times and I look at my friends, I sometimes cry because I know how they feel. Like I don't just think about how I would feel if I were them. I've been in that place. Yeah, brother, you do. You do because the Black Panthers came to the rescue with some food and goodies when the protesters needed them. And there was a camp counselor there who was able bodied, but he was a black man, yo. Thank you for reminding me just by speaking. He was a black man, right? And so he grew up in the South, and he was talking about one time, like no, not one time. He said they would get these kids loaded on a bus, and they would take them into town for ice cream, and there were business owners that were like, "Oh, we don't want these people here because they're making our customers feel uncomfortable." And they were just like, well, they're going to be here, and that's the way it's going to be. And, like, I imagine that the way they had to deal with it was leave everyone outside in front of the shop, which is part of the reason everybody was so uncomfortable. But they physically could not. Hold on. I'm streaming right now, lol. So they couldn't get in the doors, so everybody, I imagine, had to like kind of congregate outside the shop, and people who could go in probably had to go in and buy the ice cream. But this man was reflecting on how when he was growing up, he learned that he couldn't speak or act a certain way around certain people because he had to be very careful about what he said and to who and how. And so, like, to me, that spoke to me about what you and I, TJ. Oh, it's my friend Black Man by the name of Black Leroy on Twitch. He literally is black. God, I hate your names, Leroy. They make me laugh. Um, um, but like this dude, like TJ, you and I were talking about how the experience of being disabled is very similar to the experience of being black in America. And this documentary highlights that like 100% perfectly. Because what I saw in this documentary and what I want people to take away from it, and I think we need to return to this spirit, right? Um, I want to go off on a couple tangents, but a couple of groups that really came to the aid of the disability civil rights movement during this period were the Black Panthers and the labor unions, right? And like the thing is, dude, it's the Black Panthers straight up said, like, we're all about, we see you trying to make the world a better place, and that's what we're about. So if you're going to if you're going to sleep on these floors, we're going to feed you. And dude, that right there damn near brought me to tears. And that's something I don't really see in the world today. And it's something I would like to see more of. I don't know if you guys know this, but like people always say, oh, the disabled community. Uh, the disabled community is an illusion, right? I mean, because there are so many people with so many disabilities, right, that don't see their problems as being part of a larger conglomeration of similar problems. So they kind of work in isolation. They shut people out. There's a group here that I won't call out by name, but I have a story for you as an example. And if you've watched the documentary, I think you'll see why I'm telling this, right? There's a group here of people with disabilities that I ran into when I was at an event for, what was it? Disability Employment Awareness Month. You know what I'm saying? So this was for Disability Employment Awareness Month at the state of California. Um, I forgot what the hell it's called. The department responsible for the state implementation of equal opportunity employment. And it was weird for me because when I encountered this girl, I was like, cool, she's cute. I'm going to try to like spit some game, see what's going on, see if I can get hooked up with her organization. And I gave her a copy of my book. We were emailing back and forth. She read the book and went silent, completely silent. Right? Well, because, brother, I'm brown, dude. Like, only my legs are white. So, yeah. Exactly. And, so I got the double whammy. But, so she completely stopped emailing me. She was setting me up to be a guest speaker until she found out what my views are. And it's because that specific group is of the opinion that, people with disabilities should not use like the disability lines at store checkouts or at the DMV. If you can, don't use elevators, like because you're better than that, right? And I'm like, my fundamental orientation is that thinking in that way does two things, and this is why I'm against that mode of thinking. Because one, for people that are unable to do these things, there can be a feeling that they are not enough, that they aren't doing enough to be like disabled and proud, or they're doing something wrong, or somehow they're a less disabled, like they're less of a good disabled person. And I've seen this happen in my life with friends and stuff. This is what happens when you start telling them that kind of thing. The other thing is that, like, I feel like it's blatantly disrespectful for the people like Judy who sacrificed so much so that I could have a damn ramp, so that I could have an accessible checkout line or an accessible lane at the DMV or at the Social Security office or in any federal building, including courthouses, right? And so, I mean, that's my fundamental orientation, and like, it's because like my modeling before I knew anything about disabled civil rights came from the civil rights movement of the 1960s. So, like, that's still very near and dear to the way that I think about the world, right? And I think there's still a lot we can learn, even though we think we've moved past it. I don't think we have. Because the disability civil rights movement is just as complex as the Black civil rights movement. There were so many groups that were not just part of the Black community that made it possible. And I think that if we work together, we can make larger changes, right? The other thing I wanted to talk about was the idea that, like, how do I put this? There was a woman in the documentary whose name I can't recall, who talked about, there are a couple of women. One of them had CP. She lived in the Bronx. She went to college. And then she basically went home to live at home again after getting her degree because it was really hard for her to find a job. And then she got involved with ED's Centers for Independent Living down in Berkeley. And I can't stress enough, like, the work that they did in Berkeley during the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Oh, man, I know so much about this. Oh, my head's going to explode. All right. So, Ed, I can't remember his last name. I always forget his last name. But he was roommates with another dude, and they were put in the hospital, a converted hospital wing at Berkeley, because those were the only floors that could support the gurneys they needed and the respirator and all that sort of shit, right? And they were like, you know what? It's cool that they did this, but like we shouldn't have had to fight so hard. Why don't we do something? So they started the Centers for Independent Living in Berkeley from that converted dorm area. And the work that they did down in Berkeley was the template for agencies like UCP now, for agencies like the Alta Regional Centers up and down California. So, like, I owe them a debt of gratitude to talk about this. I really, really do, and that's like why I decided just to mostly stream about this. So, yeah, by the way, if you guys have any questions for me, like, I don't care if they're about the documentary or my personal life, throw them down in the chats, and I'm going to answer all of them. But I owe these dudes a debt of gratitude, because without them, like, I wouldn't be in the place that I am. I wouldn't be able to do this. Also, I wouldn't, like, without them, I wouldn't have been able to pull myself out of, like, the negativity of my own self-image, because the way that I grew up, y'all need to understand, my grandfather and grandmother, like, had a large part in my raising, my upbringing, rather. And they were born in 1934 and 1944. And so the message I grew up with is that, hey, you're really smart, and, like, that's good. Also, try not to be a burden on others. Try not to get in the way. And, like, I was listening to these people in this documentary say wholeheartedly that they were raised with similar messages. And when you, like, there was a quadriplegic woman with CP at the camp, right? And, like, hardly anyone could understand her except another dude with CP. That's like a damn superpower we have. Like, even if we have more motor coordination and have the ability for clear speech and movement and that sort of thing, like, we tend to understand other people with CP. It's strange. And so, like, she was saying through this other dude, like, he was like, I think she's saying, like, being in her position, she feels like other people have the basic right to privacy, but I don't ever get that because I need someone to care for me. And, like, I feel like I'm missing out on what it feels like to be alone. You know what I'm saying? So, like, I mean, when I heard that, I have a friend that I thought of, and she's one of those people that turned to a religious life because she felt like no one could ever love her and appreciate her in the full way that most people would eventually want. And I feel like a lot of people take that capacity for granted, right? The idea that they'll find someone who will eventually accept them. Oh, you said taking. I could take about my experiences too. I'm just saying. But so when I heard her story, I was like, damn, dude. And this other dude, what was his name? Jimmy something. Jimmy talked about, like, how he couldn't really get too mad at his mother because he depended on his mother for certain things. Like, you know, when y'all are able-bodied, man, and you get in an argument with your mother, like, regardless of your cultural background, you have the physical capability to just leave and come back. Sometimes we don't have that. So, like, I feel like getting too upset at your parents is a luxury for some people, and they don't see it as a luxury. It's just a fact of life, right? But it is a luxury. The fact that you have the ability to, like, stand up and just be like, fuck it, I'm leaving for now. I'll talk to you later. Can very much be a luxury. Like, you know, like, I've been rolling myself like 3 miles a day recently and getting kind of good, right? And, like, even then, I will never be able to move quite as fast as most people normally walk unless I try a lot harder. So if I'm in an argument with somebody and I just want to leave, it's not like I can run away from them. And like, just to bring that point home. Another thing that was really freaking surprising to me about this documentary is how complicated it was, right? So it talked about everything from like sex to a lack of self worth to like how society sees you to like unemployment to activism. Same to you, Brother Blacktastic. Same to you. It talked about all of that, and it gave me such a sense of like, I don't know the word. I guess camaraderie, right? Because I found a bunch of people that like learned to see themselves in a more positive way and to take that new knowledge. Oh, which reminds me of another story from the documentary I wanted to highlight. And to take that new knowledge and that new sense of self and use it to improve the world for other people. Um, by the way, I really enjoyed your top 30 stream with your cousin. If you don't mind my asking, like, does your cousin have some kind of disability? Like maybe autism spectrum or something like that? Just curious. You don't have to tell me. Tell him I said keep watching them movies and like gaming and doing all that good stuff. Like, keep being a good human being. Um, keep being a light in the world. We need that. Um, and just to let you all know, like, if I seem to go into a black hole for a while, right? It's because like I'm doing a couple things. I'm doing this. Um, I'm currently looking for a disability studies program. The City University of New York has a cool one online. I just have no problem, like, no idea how I'm gonna pay for it, but I'm pretty sure I could get in. um, I'm trying to figure out like as a backup plan if I can do like a design your own degree program with the interdisciplinary studies department that mimics the program at the City University of New York. Because disability studies is really what I want to do. Because what I also this leads me to the third thing. The third thing I'm doing is like I'm trying to be a life coach, dudes. And specifically, I want to work with like gamers and people with disabilities because I know like they have a lot of the same challenges, you know. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Leroy. Man, I appreciate it. Oh damn, my arms are kind of good. Anyway, um, because I think those segments of the population face very similar challenges, right? For very different reasons. Gaming is kind of looked at as being a bad thing because like the stereotype that we have. Yeah. Well, I'm going back to school, plus I'm doing a bunch of online training. So like I've been like ridiculously busy and I'm like trying to learn like two other languages, right? Porque puedo hablar español, pero no puedo hablar japonés muy bien y en el futuro me gustaría viajar a Japón para traducir documentos uh, ¿para quién? No sé. It's not important. No es importante. I forgot what I was going to say in the first place. Anyway, uh, yeah, but it's weird, right? So like I'm trying to do a lot of things, and there's only so many hours in a day. So if I disappear for a week or two, shut up, Leroy. Just because I could do multiple languages and shit. I can also do sign language, bro. You want me sign? uh, but yeah, I mean, so like I think we're nah, dude. Like for real, I can sign. Like for real, communicate with like deaf people. Um. Oh, but you understood it all, so it doesn't matter. I know, dude. I know you're joking. I'm just messing with you. Um, but like, yeah, there's only so many hours in a day, and like sometimes I feel like I don't have enough energy. So like, if I don't stream for a week or two, it's because like I need to take some time off to focus on like those other things. Because man, I need to be in the hyperbolic time chamber like Goku or something and like reach Super Saiyan 2 or 3 or something. But like the other story, and this is one I run into a lot, which is why it stuck with me. So, one thing that the documentary highlighted for me is that people with disabilities broadly come in very like there's shades of meaning and all this like across the spectrum, but there's a difference between someone like me who's born with a disability, like I was born with CP, and someone who, like, I guess the proper language would be acquires a disability later in life. So there was a young woman who, like, at the age of 22, got hit by a car and became paraplegic. And she said that she grew up. Oh, dude, you don't have to thank me for watching your video. Your videos are dope. But you're very welcome. I love both of you guys, by the way. Um, but she talked about she grew up with all the same prejudices and negative perceptions of people with disabilities that everyone else in that time did. So she had a really hard time when she realized all of a sudden, as she put it, she was one, right? And when she started joining the action to like pass Section 504 and the Rehabilitation Act, she um, she found a bunch of people who like really didn't care what her physical limitations were. Like everyone had something going on, and like she said that before that she never thought about these laws applying to her. And for people in positions similar to that, what happens is it's kind of like, okay, imagine you're with someone for like 5+ years and you're thinking about your life together with that person, right? And then they leave you or something happens to them and they're no longer with you. That kind of existential grief is very similar to what people who lose the ability to function in a way that they see as normal often go through. So not only do they have to go through what I go through every day, but they have to go through this sense of loss in a way that I've never had to deal with. So for me, it was always like a sense of missing out, right? Like I felt like, and sometimes to be honest with you, I still do, I feel like there are certain things in life sometimes that I'm not going to be able to do like everyone else. And like, as much as I try to tell myself that that's not true, as much as I have counter evidence, it's a really deeply seated feeling. So not only do they have to deal with that, but they have to deal with the idea that they are no longer the person they were. They can't like go to the bathroom in the same way. They can't have sex in the same way. Sometimes they can't eat by themselves. They can't wipe their own ass, right? But they used to be able to do all these things. They used to be able to go to clubs. They used to not have to think about anything. Now everything that they do requires forethought. And that's a completely different way of living than the way that I've had to live. So to see someone like her speak, like, man, it was crazy to me because she flipped it around. She like really traveled down the road of self-acceptance, and she admitted, like, I still have problems with this to this day, but like I try. By the way, like my Spanish isn't that great anymore because I don't speak it every day. But so I feel it. Like I really need to make it better. Like I taught myself also, so some things that I do are just wrong. um, but yeah, man, like all in all, um, I really, really loved the documentary. I think literally everyone on the planet should watch it. Um, Because one of the ideas that it drove home for me personally is that the biggest the biggest barrier to living with a disability is not necessarily a physical thing, right? It's the way society organizes itself around those differences. So, right now, we are operating from this mode of thinking where better legislation is going to fix our problems. But the problem isn't just legislation. It's the fact that when I go up to talk to a woman, she's like, oh, this Negro's in a wheelchair. Like, this automatically means a few things. Like, he's supposed to be really nice, he's non threatening, right? And, like, he's not a partner. He's not a potential partner. And, like, that and other kinds of preconceptions, like the fact that, like, disabled people on SSI don't want to work. Bro, if I could get a job that had better insurance than Medi-Cal and Medicare, I wouldn't be worried about where I worked or what I did. But since I have to worry about those kinds of things, I have to make different kinds of decisions. So I have to start my own business because, first of all, like, I don't like people that much. As good as I am with, like, I don't like working for people. I've done that a lot, and I found that I would much rather work for myself. And, like, as a self-employed disabled person, it's easier for me to maintain Medi-Cal and Medicare than it is otherwise. So that's why the life coach thing. And I think I can make a bigger difference working one-on-one with people than working in large groups. That being said, I'm probably going to try to work for an agency like Alter Regional, right? All right, Leroy, have a good day, brother, man. Anybody have any questions for me? Yeah, let's answer some questions. But yeah, everyone should watch this documentary. Like, I owe a debt of gratitude to everyone who went to that camp. And yeah. Any questions? Because if not, man, I actually wanted to read a random ass article about Taoism and disability. If y'all want to listen to me fumble at reading, what do you think? I'll try to pull up the article, see what happens. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Man, I really look up too much philosophy crap. Where, man, I can't find it. Does anybody remember where it is? Of course.